Welcome! Emotions are everywhere. So how can we be smarter with our feelings? The answer is emotional intelligence, or EQ. We're delighted you're watching, because at 6 seconds, we're working towards 1 billion people practicing the skills of emotional intelligence. Can we count you in? Here on 6 Seconds channel, you'll find practical skills for work and life, inspiration for today, and support to build a better future for all.
Hello, welcome everyone to our weekly live show. I have to say I've been looking forward to these live shows every week, and this week is particularly exciting as we're talking about coaching, which is one of my favorite topics. We're delighted to have you here in the show, watching on YouTube and on Facebook, and I'm very excited about the panelists that we're going to have today. I want to remind you and thank you again for being interested and helping us spread the message of emotional intelligence during these tough times. We believe this is a crucial time to be practicing the skills of emotional intelligence and connect with each other in many different ways. This live panel that we are hosting every Tuesday is part of actually a new series of live events. We're doing 15 events a week. They are called Grow You. And I'd love to show you next week's schedule all the way to get started. Next week is going to be very interesting. We're going to keep talking about coaching. As you can see, we have a great coaching session on May 28th about 3 superpowers to make coaching better. And the overarching theme of next week is going to be making friends with all emotions. And so we're going to have a live panel on Tuesday at 8 a.m. California time called Honoring All Emotions. I want to also point out another session that is going to be really interesting. Is going to be our first one of that kind, which is going to be on Monday. It's the Welcome to Grow You, getting started with EQ and 6 seconds. And for anybody who is curious about our work and has questions, it's going to be a very interactive and fun session for you to join and participate. Today's panel, let me get this out of the way. Today's panel is called the Coach Approach, applying tools and methods of coaching to make work and life better. And it's very exciting because it's not necessarily a technical conversation about the principles of coaching, but it's more of a practical dive into how coaching and how all these methodologies can really help us in the everyday life, regardless of our role. So I have a really important request before we get started. Please participate either on chat or comment after the show is over. Share it with your friends. This is really helpful for us to keep going and delivering this content to you all. And now I want to introduce the moderator of the day, Joshua Friedman, and he's going to introduce the rest of the panel. Hi, Josh.
Hey, Tom, thank you. I'm so excited about today's show. And we're going to start out meeting our panelists and learning a little bit about what they think about coaching. But as Tom said, our focus today isn't really on the technicalities of like how to coach. Our conversation today is about all of us, whether we're working as coaches or living our lives. How do we use the concepts and techniques and skills of coaching, particularly in times where we've got deep challenges? My own experience is that I've seen how powerful it is for people when they go through this process and they start getting coaching and learning to be coaches. It's transformational, and I see people overcoming incredibly difficult barriers in order to move forward in their lives when they have a partner to help them do that. And so we wanted to talk about today how many of us are in a place of a painful uncertainty, huge struggles in terms of health, in terms of mental health, in terms of economic health, in terms of our societies, in terms of trying to wrangle kids at home and work. And as the weeks of the pandemic and shelter in place are turning into months, I think for a lot of us, we're really ready for some new tools. So I was thrilled that today we were able to bring this panel together. And I thought, well, if we could have anybody on the panel, who should we ask? And I was blown away. I said, oh, how about, would you join us? And these awesome people said, sure, why not? So I'm very excited that we're going to get to have this conversation. And then very importantly, at the end, we'll bring together the essential ideas, and we hope you'll stay to capture that and to help us. And I'm really excited to see people here from California and Ahmed, I don't know where you're from, and Chicago and Austria and Vancouver and India and Malaysia. It's really fun to have all of you here. And I'd like it if you could just put in the chat one reason that you're here. What's something in this topic that particularly interested you? Some reason that you wanted to be part of this conversation. And we will bring that into the conversation with the panelists. And I will be asking you questions in the chat. And those of you who are watching later, watching the recording, please do the same thing in the comments, because we'd love to continue to interact with you even after we're no longer live. All right, so with that, if we could get our panelists here, and I'm going to ask a question to each of you panelists to introduce yourselves and tell us, as you've been working on coaching yourself, just give us one phrase of how has coaching changed you personally. Magdalena, can we start with you?
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Josh, for the invitation, and super excited to have such an international audience today, and of course my colleagues here in the panel. My name is Magdalena Mook. I'm an executive director and CEO of the International Coaching Federation. So I have just about 40,000 of best colleagues and friends who are professionally trained coaches in my organization. And for me, I think the very first greatest learning from actually working with the coach first before I got trained as a coach was that attention to reflective practice. Being aware that sometimes the biggest aha moment comes much later than in a sphere of conversation. So giving the space for that reflection and allowing things to be digested was the first big learning from coaching.
Thank you. Bruce, how about you?
Hi, Josh. Really nice to be here. Thank you so much for the invite. And hello to everyone out there. My name is Bruce Perry. I am currently in Abu Dhabi. I have the privilege of working for Cleveland Clinic out here in Abu Dhabi. I lead an organizational effectiveness team, which ultimately helps the organization and its people reach their potential and ensure that we sustain performance. I think from my perspective, coaching took me from a place of being if I was honest, a self-proclaimed people person, closed the door on that and pushed me to a place of continuously learning the amazing attributes that humans have and how much we can support each other and position ourselves to ensure that we achieve our purpose and ensure we take hold of our talents as well. I think that for me is something that fits really central to what has enlightened me consistently in my coaching journey.
Brett, how about you?
Yes, thank you, Josh. It's awesome to be here. My name is Dr. Brett. I was the U.S. Medical Director for the Paralympic Games and a senior high-performance healthcare provider with the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. And coaching for me has been a part of my life since I was a kid, from having coaches in sports to adulthood as a coach for elite athletes, as well as coaching in the executive world. And coaching on both sides of that has always been something that pushes you outside of your comfort zone. It causes growth because of that whenever we step outside of our comfort zone. And having a coach push you and have you try new things and step into that unknown is powerful, but also when you are coaching, when you're doing the same for others, it pushes you to new levels as well and helps you evolve and adapt that way.
Thank you. Marilyn, how about you?
Hi, nice to see you all. I'm Marilyn Jorgensen. I'm a master trainer with 6 Seconds and an MCC coach. I'm also very pleased to be the co-author of the EQ Coach Certification Program, which is an ACTP with ICF. And Josh Friedman and I created this program about 5 years ago, and it's been a very exciting journey. As I think about my most current learning, because as a coach, we learn all the time from and with our clients. The word that came to mind this morning was orient. And I am really working to orient myself and adapt and align and adjust. It's sort of a cycle every day with the current world situation. So I orient myself in order to be ready for a client. I orient myself to the client and their situation. And I find that emotional intelligence provides me a map for that kind of orientation. And my other map is my purpose. And I get my bearings in that way. And I feel like in today's world, getting my bearings and orienting myself really provides me with a grounded presence.
Thank you, Marilyn. And I guess especially in times when we have so much uncertainty, it's hard to stay oriented.
Yeah.
Jenny, how about you?
Yeah, hello, and greetings from central London, where it's a warm, sunny day for a change. I've been a coach, executive coach, for about 30 years. I'm an obsessive writer. I train other coaches. I supervise other coaches. I think what coaching has done for me is that I was brought up in Wales in a social environment I would describe as saturated in disapproval. There were very narrow opinions that you were allowed to have. Everybody had the same houses, the same opinions. Certain things you weren't supposed to do. I think getting an education and leaving that environment obviously was helpful. But I think what coaching has done, it's made me a much more tolerant person. I think I'm very hard to shock now.
Yes, it's interesting when you start establishing trusting connections with people, what they end up telling you. So let's just, Jenny, you've written multiple books on this subject, but if you were to just distill it down to one sentence, what's coaching?
It's a way for people to learn how to understand themselves and how to make better decisions with the help of a skilled person who knows how to ask the question that we would never ask ourselves, the killer question.
And Magdalena, how about you? What's your one sentence answer?
Yeah. Killer question is just perfect. But it is about partnering in a challenging way sometimes for people to reach deep into themselves. And as Brett said, reach their potential and sustain that potential.
So, Brett, what do you see as different between coaching and other ways of interacting with people?
Well, coaching is one of those things where it's about, like you said, asking the right questions, but also really engaging in the listening process. That's where the assessment comes in, to see your role as the coach, to determine what that big question is. Because that's what it's about, right? Is asking that big question and those big questions to get someone to look deeper and to evolve. And that's something that can't be multitasked. You have to be really engaged and really listening.
Bruce, you're on an interesting journey there in the hospital to transform the culture, or maybe strengthen the culture, by infusing coaching. What does it mean to you to infuse coaching into a leadership culture?
Good question, Josh. I think the uniqueness of our environment out here in Abu Dhabi is that we're dealing with some technical clinical stuff. We've got tertiary care, but we've also got over 85 different nationalities under one roof. So the more complex our cultural environment is, the simpler we want our relationships to be. And the simplicity that coaching has brought to people interacting on a daily basis, even now, has given us certainly tangible evidence that we're moving to a better place with our culture and transforming consistently.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to ask everybody who's watching this question, as well as the panelists. My sense is that, as Marilyn says, we're in a time with lots of big emotions. When I first saw Marilyn use this phrase, big emotions, it just was such a huge relief to me, as somebody who grew up being afraid of emotions. This just, oh, it looks like you're having big emotions. It's like, wow, what an incredible way to frame this. So it seems like in the world today, there's a lot of big emotions going on. And I want to ask the panelists, but first I want to ask all of you who are watching live, what are you noticing is going on with people emotionally right now? With yourself, the people that you're sheltering in place with, the people you're meeting with online, what are some of the differences in the kind of emotional world that you're seeing now versus way back in the old days 3 months ago? And Marilyn, maybe you could talk about that for a minute as we are getting people sharing in the chat.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. What I notice is that people's emotions are all over the map from one day to the next. They're having multiple emotions, conflicting emotions all at once. And as people do that, they get really confused and fearful about the trajectory of their emotional landscape. And I often, use a system of validation, validating the feelings, exploring what that feeling means, and then being able to transform that emotion into something usable, because there's a lot of information in the emotions, even if they're confusing and all over the map. So I think that it's important to really accept and validate that feeling has a lot of emotional data for you to learn from, and to really validate that and sink into it and not be afraid that the emotion is going to take over. It actually settles down once we validate the emotional landscape that is in front of us during these times.
Well, as you know well, Marilyn, there was a time when I didn't like to ask people how they were feeling because I was afraid they might tell me. And then, and then what would I do? And so my strategy was, I would see emotions and I just kind of pretend they weren't there. I just want to share a couple of the comments from the chat. That there's so many emotions happening at once, and that there's instability and something new for people, and it's magnified.
Mm-hmm.
And in all of that, there's a helplessness.
Mm-hmm.
And but also more anticipation and more wonder. This reactivity. I think people are seeing small things as big, but maybe at the greatest time I've ever seen, people are willing to talk about what they're feeling. And maybe it's, that's part of what's overwhelming. So what advice would you give, or what question would you ask yourself? Jenny, let's go to you. When you're in this state that Julie describes, I'm sure that we've all been there sometimes. What do you ask yourself?
Well, if I could make a comment on the question you asked before, what I notice is that there is no one kind of feeling that people have. I think there's an enormous range. There are people who are actually quite enjoying the whole thing, probably feeling guilty that they are. I'm working with an anaesthetist, for instance, who's right in the front line, who's working in intensive care, and says she's having one of the best times of her life. She knows the work she's doing is valuable. It's tough, it's very challenging, but she wouldn't describe herself as miserable. So I think we have to be aware of not generalizing too much. But I think the question I ask myself is, how can I make the most of today, this day, right now? And that's what I encourage my clients to ask themselves too.
How about you, Bruce? I imagine there are a lot of big feelings in the hospital right now.
Yeah, I think I saw that little elephant with a heart on its bottom come up, and that certainly is a depiction of quite a few activities in the hospital right now. And what we're seeing right now is some primary emotions that are really brutal, in some ways. And why I mean primary is that they're quite simplistic. There's almost a tangible fear. There's a desperate willingness to protect, particularly family members of people that are on the front line. And then at the same time, there's a secondary emotion that a lot of people are going through, which aligns with what Marilyn was saying around the actual evolution of your emotions and how, without tracking them up front when they really are primary and quite brutal, it's leading people to a place of deep reflection and uncertainty, which is shifting their foundations. So all those elements make it incredibly interesting, but at the same time concerning if we don't unlock people's emotions and help them to understand what they're thinking as well.
Magdalena, you are in the position, like some of us, of leading an organization at the same time trying to just grapple with life. What are you doing as a leader, as a CEO, with the emotions? I mean, just for a little context, a lot of coaches are able to work right now, and yet I know there are literally thousands of coaches who have lost their income suddenly and precipitously. And of course, that's affecting all of us who work in this space. So as a leader, what's going on for you?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, and I'm repeating, I think the sentiment of some of my colleagues on the panel here is that there are so many different, depending which model you use, so many stages of dealing with crisis. And I see my own staff and many of our members going through being in different stage of that crisis acknowledgement, if you will, and some are moving back and forth between different phases. So first and foremost, we need to acknowledge that there are people being in a very different space at the moment. So some more on the fear side, some more of a let's see what good it can bring side of a conversation. As for coaches, what we hear from our coaches often is, I feel hopeless. I may lose a lot of my income. And yet recently we start hearing like people start calling again. Coaching is making a humongous difference, and coaching made its spot, if you will, in a marketplace. So even though there are some challenges to budgets and everybody's looking into what's going to happen next, coaching seems to be regaining its position as something that it's indispensable right now. It's not nice to have, it's must have. Because again, as you said, Josh, open up the emotions and being able to talk about the emotions, not being either ashamed of that or thinking like, oh, I'm showing my vulnerability. Vulnerability now is one of the traits of the great leadership. So I actually think that that we are going into the next stage, hopefully sooner than later. And my major comment about that is that coaches also have to recognize and acknowledge that they are people too, and they need to take care of themselves. It's not their care for their families, communities, and their clients alone. It is also the taking care of themselves, which is really, really important right now.
I just appreciate this comment from Jim. And Brett, I'm curious, as you're thinking about your work as a coach, and you've been around many, many coaches who are maybe different than the kind of coaching that the rest of us are involved in. Is it up to the coach to move people forward?
I think the coach can be a tool in that process, a someone who can step in. And everybody really is in that emotional roller coaster right now, right? Where there's no real time for emotional reprieve. We're bombarded every time we look at anything right now. We see more news, more whatever it is that's coming in. And so that's not allowing us all to step back and get in touch with the emotion, digest it, come to terms with it, because then we're hit with something else before we get to that point a lot of times. And the coach can help that process. The coach can slow down the mental chatter by having a conversation, by asking the question, where's this coming from? Why are you feeling this way? And coaching right now it's been a huge benefit to lots of people. I mean, we're coaching athletes around the world right now using this technologies and along with the corporate coaching and things. So coaches right now, I think, can be more important than ever. It has been challenging for a lot of coaches because all of us have been turned upside down. Things have changed, but everybody's adapting. Everybody's finding new ways to develop their skill sets and help others to grow. And this is, like I said, this is a great opportunity to try out coaching if you've never had a coach before, or try coaching others if you've never coached before.
Thank you, Brett. Marilyn, in this moment, when there's so much going on for people, whether it's going well or whether it's brutal, is a lot. And in our LinkedIn chat that we do every weekend before our live panels, somebody brought up how difficult it is to listen to each other with all this going on. So I asked you this question because I know you are phenomenally good at listening. When you find yourself caught up in all this stuff, what do you do to come back to listening?
Well, I just remind myself, and this is a term that was used by somebody before I became a coach, and it's one of the reasons I did become a coach. And she said to me, a coach is a guide on the side. And as a previous therapist, I loved that notion that I could be co-creating and exploring possibilities with people. And so I bring myself back to that terminology, Josh, in your question, is to be the guide on the side. I'm shoulder to shoulder with people. And that's a different kind of listening than when I was a therapist, for example. And I love that that quality that comes up with coaching, to be the collaborating partner with the client, not for the client, not in front of the client, but with the client. And then it becomes a place of, the opportunity is to have the client feel heard, be accepted, be acknowledged, be stimulated, be validated, be seen. And what's more important than that right now is to feel like somebody is understanding, and that there is a collaborative approach to those sort of powerful questions like Brett mentioned. And I think that's what that guide on the side keeps coming up for me, as that's my job, whether I'm coaching somebody or whether I'm a friend to a family member or a grandmother to my grandchildren. I still maintain that that's important with all people in the world today as we navigate the world beyond just our coaching clients.
Yeah. Danny, how about you? What does your book tell us that you are using yourself? What's the thing in the book you go to and go, okay, yes, I need to remember this today?
Well, I don't think I could improve on what Marilyn's just said. She put it so beautifully and elegantly. It is about being seen and being heard. And mostly, I think what we experience is pretend listening. People say, "Oh, I hear what you say," or "Yes, I'm sorry for your loss," or some other awful cliche. And the thing that makes coaching work is the willingness of the coach to listen, however uncomfortable it is, and for people to feel that, to be okay for people to be vulnerable. Because coaching is a place where they can drop their defenses, and that's very, very rare. And as a coach, you have to learn really how to do that and stop yourself doing that thing that we all love to do, which is give people advice.
Oh, I have some advice about that, Jenny.
Yeah.
I want to go back to continue on this theme and kind of go to the personal. So Magdalena, if you could wave your magic wand and have somebody coach you, what is it that you're longing for? What is it what is the gift that you would get from that experience?
I have 2 magic wands. Neither one is working these days for some reason. And I also, of course, work with the professional coach as well. Right now, frankly, my focus is on how can I resource, as a leader, as a CEO, how can I resource my team? Because I see everything that we've talked about anxiety, about fear, about being actually quite excited about the future, how we can change and evolve and come stronger. So keeping a cohesive team is something that it's been interesting experiment, to say the least. So my focus on my work with my coach right now is how can I best resource my team. Listening is definitely one of it, but as we know in coaching, sometimes a good challenge is what moves things forward. So if you can see the magic, glitter coming, that's about that.
Thank you. How about you, Bruce? What are you longing for?
I would say right now, for the role my team is playing, the ability to notice patterns very quickly in an environment where, as we've just discussed, it's just changing so quickly. So those patterns that a coach would enable us to see quicker would be incredibly helpful for us to ensure that we are starting at the right place. And at the same time, I think Brett mentioned earlier, getting people to operate within their sweet spot, even during crisis, that's just like a silver bullet. And helping our doctors and our nurses to be more in that space would be amazing. And certainly the ability to see patterns would unlock that if we could do it quicker.
And how about for you?
For me, this is something I learned through you guys, Josh. The distinction of where empathy needs to be reeled back in, and focused on the objectivity of who you're coaching in front of you is important.
Yeah.
That certainly would be something I would really like to have more of.
It's a fascinating and huge challenge, I think, for a lot of us, is to be deeply empathic and connected with the people that we're coaching and working with and living with and grandparenting and parenting and friending, and also with ourselves. I want to go to another question. The Secretary General of the United Nations just made, I believe, a stunning announcement, which was that every pandemic response needs to consider mental health. And this is not something that political leaders have talked very much about in the past. Is there a place, does coaching play a part in this alleviation of the mental health burden that our world is facing? And I know this is a tricky area. Jenny, let's start with you.
Well, I'm not sure it is tricky, really, Josh. It seems obvious to me that coaching and mental health are entwined. And when I'm doing that first session where you're asking people what's going on in their lives, and probably all of us on this panel have used the good old wheel of life thing where one of the wedges is health. I used just to ask people about their physical health. But now I divide that wedge in two, and I ask them about their physical health, and then I say, oh, what about your mental health? I've never had a client refuse to answer that question. And what they say makes it clear to me that they're eager to talk about it and that they don't see this big divide that some of us in the coaching world have created for ourselves between mental health, physical health, and the apparent business of coaching. I think it is definitely our business. I don't see how you can divide it off.
Well, I'm so excited about your answer. Marilyn, you and I have had the fascinating experience of being in certain places in the world where people say, but wait, I thought coaches weren't supposed to talk about emotions or only, quote, positive emotions. So for you, as somebody who comes from a clinical background, what is the relationship you see between coaching or the role that coaching plays in mental health?
It's a very fluid landscape, as you might imagine. But there are times where, you think, oh, the fluidity of this conversation might also motivate me to collaborate with a therapist or a psychiatrist. But the fluidity of that becomes, I think, quite nice because we can be the coach that we are without disregarding the parameters of what a coach is and what a coach is not. And yet I agree with Jenny also, is that it's an opportunity for us to really connect with people. It's that same sort of thing, that acceptance that's being heard. And when I feel like we've sort of met the boundaries of our coaching, then I'm very happy to collaborate with other professionals, because that collaboration allows the client to feel like, oh, but I'm not in a box with a coach and then I have to go get into another box with a psychiatrist or a psychologist, that we work together for the mental health of our clients. And that I try to teach to coach students, is that to have that sort of relationship with others so that you can provide that smooth, seamless work together. But it is a place and a space for exploring and communicating and being able to fulfill the needs of that client while doing the job that you are trained to do in a way that is comprehensive.
Well, and I suppose in terms of our physical health, there's a lot of things that help us be healthy that don't require us to go to the doctor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. You're somebody who works in this space of like total health. What is the role of coaching in health, period?
Absolutely. This is an opportunity for healthcare to evolve and more clinicians to take on coaching or coach. I feel like it would be beneficial for all clinicians to go through coach training. It's an opportunity for them to, as mentioned earlier, to stand alongside someone as opposed to stand above them and give them the doctor's orders, just to stand alongside and address total health and really address the emotions and address the mental aspect of it. And I was in a very unique situation for healthcare for many years, where there was no billing, there was no insurance. It was a very small group, elite group population of people. But when we would close the door, and part of my clinical treatment would be acupuncture and be a very relaxing situation. And as we'd start treating, the emotions would come out, and there was so much more there. And it made you realize how much total health is really the key. It's not about the physical. It's not just about the mental. It's not just about the emotional. It's all of it together. That's total health. And that is the definition of health.
Thank you. I'd like to ask everyone who's watching, what do you, as you're looking at the way the world is right now, and some things that aren't new and some things that are new, some things we're seeing more clearly, what is it that you think people need to strengthen and grow? Brett just said, doctors need to learn how to coach. Like, what are the skills that the people around you need in order to move forward? If you could, again, Magdalena's magic wand is broken, but I've got one here. If I can lend it to you, here you go. what is it that you would want people around you to learn or be stronger at or better at in order to move forward from where we are today? And Magdalena, let's come back to you. What are you seeing that people need in order to move forward?
Right now, I'll say that the self-awareness and self-acceptance is what's needed. Because first of all, for a coach or for any individual, just coming close to your emotions and recognizing them, acknowledging them, and just accepting them for what they are. That's the first step to move forward. I remember talking to a very good friend of mine who's a coach. Her husband is a ER physician, and at the early stages of pandemic, she was saying, I feel so hopeless. I feel so useless. He is on front lines. And again, the rest of us told her, I said, but you're going to be next. So just be ready, be prepared, but by also be mentally prepared to offer your service. So as long as you're alerted to your own self, this is, I think, what people need right now to be able to map out the way to the future.
Well, it's interesting. Obviously, we have a very biased group here who's chosen to be in this show with us. But just looking at some of the comments and how people are talking about really these emotional intelligence capabilities. And I think this is quite interesting to think, if we can't connect with ourselves inside, how do we do this? How do we have compassion for others if we don't also have it for self? Mm-hmm. And Hong likewise. It's interesting how many of these comments are in this space of like being connected inside and with others. Bruce, do you have something to add there?
I love what has just been said. I think Magdalena mentioned that, being okay with not being okay is such a powerful place to start at. Mm-hmm. And for me, what I'm seeing unfold in my situation at the hospital is that there gives people just a little slither of space to start that journey of self-reflection, which pushes them ultimately to a place of, okay, well, now I can start to unpack these emotions, and then I can start connecting them to my thoughts. And I'm oversimplifying it, but I really liked the actual statement of being okay with not being okay as a starting point.
Mm. Magdalena, something to add?
Yeah, being okay with not being okay is absolutely, we're all superheroes, right? So you still can be a superhero and maybe have a moment of reflection. That reflection, that actually, I think, gives us a deeper understanding of self. And to me, and many coaches would probably say the same, is that this is where it all starts. And this is what we work with our clients on, for them to understand self. Because without doing that, we may be building the foundation, or we're building the house on a foundation that it's not solid.
Jenny, how about you?
Well, yeah, I can't disagree with what people have said and what your the comments from people who are watching have said as well. It obviously does always start with empathy and self-understanding. I would say once you get a measure of that, the thing that I think is absolutely critical is to help people acquire better skills of managing conflict. And I think what's happened during the lockdown is a lot of people have discovered that their relationships are not as robust as they thought they were. And they are falling out with their partners, with their kids, and they don't know what to do. They don't have basic conflict management skills. Now, obviously, it does start with self-awareness, but then you go on to other awareness. And I think that's where what we learn as coaches is the absolutely fundamental thing is you cannot change other people. The only person you can change is yourself. And a huge amount of our effort goes into trying uselessly, pointlessly, trying to change other people when it's impossible. And I think that's the art of being a coach, is how to accept that you can't change the client, but you can ask questions which enable them to change themselves.
So I want to take advantage of you all being here and get a little free coaching. So I'm a CEO of an organization. Like many organizations are, I mean, we've lost 2/3 of our revenue in April. So the water feels very deep. It feels very uncertain. And I'm trying a lot of things like this, but sometimes I'm laying awake at 3 a.m. saying, is this what I should be focusing on? Am I putting my energy in the right place? What would you ask me? Marilyn, let's start with you. You're muted, dear.
You're muted.
I have sort of an inside peek at your life, Josh. So you've been brave in throwing this question at me. I know how dedicated and how hard you work, and I know how creative and visionary you are around what to do during this time. And I just would ask you, there's a lot to do. There's a lot to create. There's a lot to accomplish. But I would ask you, what is it that you want to be right now? When you sink into that place of not all the things to do in order to swim to the top of this deep pond, what is it that how do you want to be in this? What do you want to learn from this? And have that moment of stillness where you might take some of that time. So that's a long question, but it is a statement also about what is it, Josh, that you are hoping to be through this challenging time?
Yeah, that turns out to be an incredibly powerful question for me, and I think for many, because sometimes we can't do the things that we normally do. We can't do what we expect. We're literally stuck at home, right? Mm-hmm. So I think for me, I've been thinking a lot about how do I want to look back on this, and look back on myself in this. And I think who I want to be is someone who's connecting. Mm-hmm. Anyone else have an offer for my free coaching session before we move on to the next question?
I have.
Go, Jenny.
Yeah. So, Josh, there you are in the middle of the night. You're tossing and turning, and you're thinking of all the awful things that could happen, which is probably how you might wake up at those times. I think I would ask you what's within your control and what isn't.
She stole my question.
For instance, you can't control President Trump's verbal.
I want to.
You can't control the kind of statistics that are produced and who produces them. And it's very maddening here seeing a very incompetent government struggling to do all those things, but I can't affect that. But I think you could ask yourself, what can I control and what can't I? And I would follow up with, what can I control in the short term and the medium term and the longer term, which would just be speculation, basically. Mm-hmm. But I think that would help. Stop worrying about the things you can't control. Do worry about the things you can.
Yeah, that's very practical. Thank you, Jenny. And Magdalena, one more.
Yeah, CEO to CEO, I completely understand where you're living right now. And my question is not very different, I think, from Jenny's, but it's like, what would make you sleep at night? Let's identify that's one thing, and then we can figure out how to get there.
One small step, Brett.
Yeah, I was going to say that, we talked about earlier finding that big question, and that's one of the big questions in this situation is what can you control? And then use your values as a guidepost. Make sure you've established your values. And when you ask yourself that question, what can you control? And then how does that align with my values? And that's going to lead you the right path every time.
Yeah, I think Marilyn brought that up earlier, the power of purpose. And for me, that question of who I want to be and what is my purpose are deeply linked. And if I'm not putting my energy into a place where it feels really connected with my purpose, in this time, this chaotic time, I just feel so lost. So I think it's made me kind of double down on being purposeful. And I just have to share, in the chat, we have a very important question going on about the window behind me. So I have to tell you the secret, which is I actually put a piece of plywood outside the window because the light in the morning when we're doing the show, the light was so bright. So normally it does open, but not during the show. All right. I want to go to a kind of concluding question, and I want to ask everybody in the chat as well as all of you on the panel. From what you've heard, I promised we would end with some practical takeaways. So what's a specific question that, or tool or something that you panelists are taking away from this conversation? And all of you in the chat, what's your one kind of key takeaway? If we're going to summarize these into a bunch of social media posts, which we will, what would be your meme? Brett, you ready?
Sure. I mean, that ability to genuinely connect, that's what coaching is about, right? It's genuinely connecting, asking those open-ended big questions, and then taking time to dive into it and unpack it and unpack the emotions, and to be in these types of situations, to be adaptable, to realize that you're not able to control everything, but you can get uncomfortable, or you can be comfortable with being uncomfortable and get used to that situation and grow from it and use it as an opportunity to grow.
And Bruce, how about you? What's going to be your meme? I think you're muted. Your meme is going to be unmute yourself before talking.
Right, got it, done. Josh, just skimming through the live comments, I think I would summarize things as helping people nowadays to simplify where their context is not simple, is such a gift. And if we take that principle into how we coach, we surely are going to help people at this time.
Thank you. Jenny, how about you?
Well, Josh, you said something very important, I think, at the beginning about making feelings legitimate. And I think one of the very first things I learned when I was training as a coach was feelings are facts. They're not some fluffy, stupid thing that we should be ashamed of. And legitimizing feelings is a very important part, and we know now it is from neuroscience that it is the decision-making part of the human brain. But I think Magdalena said something important as well earlier, which was the importance for us as coaches and everybody watching of looking after ourselves. So I think, how can I look after myself today? It's not selfish to do that. I need to do that in order to be there for other people. It's a very, very important question.
Thank you. Magdalena, I want to ask you a slightly different question, which is, and others too, which is in our pre-chat on LinkedIn, Julie pointed out that she's trying to get people in her organization, and she works in a professional services firm, to think about that coaching skills would be really helpful for them as leaders, as professionals, as people. So I know you spend a lot of time thinking about this. How do we communicate the value of coaching? So what advice would you give Julie and everybody else, and Bruce and everybody else who's saying, I need people in my organization to embrace this idea?
Thank you for that question. Actually, it is something growing in what I observe in our industry is growing tremendously, and it is the managers and leaders being trained in coaching skills. It's not to be fully trained to be a coach. It is paying attention to certain of the core coaching competencies, and frankly, there are some very good trainings already available for managers and leaders who are willing to use coaching skills. ICF created a set of research with the Human Capital Institute on building coaching cultures in organizations. You can find it on our website, coachfederation.org. And this is really showing the return on investment on having managers and leaders being more inclusive, just exemplifying the modern way of leadership. And specifically to Bruce, actually, there is a lot of research also around medical personnel, nurses, doctors, when and if they use coaching skills and when they care for themselves, that the results of the treatment are significantly better. So I would be the first proponent of suggesting that leaders having coaching skills are more effective leaders, and the ultimate goals for the organization are being greater because of that.
Brett, it seems like in the athletic realm, nobody's like, oh, coaching is weird. Like, it just seems normal. How do you kind of bridge that into the corporate work you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, every coach knows that every athlete knows that a coach is part of their success. It's part of their toolbox, so to speak, of how they achieve what they want to achieve. And when I stepped away, mostly away from that realm, from the Olympic Committee into the corporate coaching and into working with professionals, I took that same idea, but trying to help someone who maybe has never had coaching before. How do you break that barrier? And when you do make that genuine connection, when you do genuinely listen to what they're saying, then they start to see coaching is an opportunity for me to grow in a way that I had never had before, because there's someone here to support me, where they were carrying the weight of the, as a CEO, you carry the weight of a lot. You carry heavy burdens, and to be that genuine connection for somebody that is able to kind of not just unload that burden on you, but to open up a little bit. And so that's how that transfer can be there. You see it in the athletic world. Athletes a lot of times don't want to worry about all these things. They don't want to worry about their periodization. How do they get to the next evolution in their training? When does the recovery day? Those are things they want to think about. They want to show up, they want to do the work. And the coach unloads that for them. And the same thing in the corporate realm. It's the exact same. A coach can help unload and ask those questions and steer them in the right direction.
Thank you. Marilyn, what for you has been the kind of secret sauce that makes EQ and coaching work so well together?
I would say that, especially during these times, I find that, I'm around that cycle of know yourself, choose yourself, be yourself, which is all about self-awareness, as many of you have, being more self-aware, tuned in, being able to make intentional choices with a sense of presence, and be able to really have that empathic principle purpose that helps drive that. So that's our 6-second secret sauce. And I find myself, Magdalena, going back to this comment you made about the coaching culture, and as a secret sauce piece for me, in my community right now, I find that I am bringing that coaching culture to my friendships. I'm bringing that coaching culture to my partnership with my husband. I'm bringing that coaching culture to friendships and teaching through just the interactions. And I think for me right now, and it's a really big piece for me, is that as a coach, when I'm not in my office being the coach, I am living that 6 seconds methodology and coaching in order to be a better human being.
Mhm.
Humanity is really thirsty for this human connection right now, and coaching culture is part of that.
Thank you, Marilyn. Well, I'll just do a little pitch on that to say we've had some people in our shows and even in our Growing You classes saying, you people at 6 seconds use words like know yourself, choose yourself, give yourself, and I want to know what that means. So we decided we're going to create a class that we're going to do on Mondays for the next couple of weeks. And the first one will be on next Monday. I'll step over. You can put that back. I'll step over here. Thank you. This is the 6 seconds model of how we think emotional intelligence is put into action. Anyway, so we'll have a class on Monday introducing what is emotional intelligence and welcome to 6 seconds approach. And so any of you who are new to 6 seconds realm, or many of you who've been part of 6 seconds for a long time, you are invited. And we're going to give everybody a chance to take the 6 seconds assessment and get their unlocking the Q profile and have a little orientation session every Monday. So that'll be on the schedule for next week. Well, I wanted to thank all of you for sharing. I can't believe our hour is up. We're going to have to do this again. I don't know where these hours go so fast. I really appreciated the conversation and your openness to sharing about your own experiences and challenges. And I look forward to connecting with you all again soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
And before I hand it back to Tom, I just wanted to share one experience that I've had with coaching that's been incredibly powerful for me, which is, at first I thought that when I was doing a good job coaching, that I was shining a light on my client, and that in that light, they were getting to see their strength and their capability and their opportunity. And what I realized recently, and I'm embarrassed to say that this is only very recently, what I realized recently is that it's not me shining a light on the client. It's this, as this process unfolds and we start to build empathic connection together and we build trust together, we actually ask each other questions. This light is co-created. And in that light, my clients see their incredible capability and strength, and I see mine too. And that for me is what I've come to really love about this work, is that it's brightening that light that lets us all see possibilities. So thank you all for joining today, and Tom, back to you.
Thank you, everybody. What a great panel. I loved it. Thank you so much to everybody, all the panelists that came today and added so much value. And thanks for all of you watching and commenting. All your questions were helping the conversation progress and gain even more value. If you love this, please share it with your friends, on our video on YouTube and Facebook, and comment. Let us know what you would like our next panel to be. Ask us questions. We love to engage with you on these topics. I also want to remind you that this is part of the Grow You classes, and I want to show you a couple that I think will be useful for you. This is the schedule for this week. So tomorrow morning we're gonna keep going with the coaching topic with Maria at 6 a.m. California time. There is going to be a new resilience part 4 on purpose at 8 a.m. California time, and a really great session for healthcare providers at 4 p.m. with Colette and Josh. And next week, as I said, the whole week is going to be about coaching and how do we value and embrace and honor all emotions that we have. So we're going to have a great panel at 8 a.m. California time. And then at 9 a.m., we're going to have a panel of Gen Z and youth talking about this same topic and how can we really make friends with all emotions. And so thank you again for being here, and we'll love to connect with you next week as well. Bye.
If this was helpful, would you please comment, like, share, and subscribe? The Emotional Intelligence Network is your community to grow and practice EQ. At 6 Seconds, that means being smarter with feelings. And we're here to provide practical, proven EQ tools so workplaces, schools, and people can thrive everywhere in the world. Be sure to visit 6seconds.org to find the complete suite of resources, assessments, and programs. Thank you for watching.